Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs. Once upon a time, there was a little princess named Snow White. She lived in a castle with her stepmother, the queen. But the queen was a wicked and jealous woman. Every day, the wicked queen asked her magic mirror the same question. "Magic mirror on the wall, who is the fairest one of all?" And she always heard the same answer.
"You are the fairest, O queen."
But one day, the magic mirror gave a very different answer.
"Fair is thy beauty, majesty, but there is one more fair than you."
"Tell me her name," cried the queen.
"Lips red as a rose,"
replied the mirror.
"Hair black as ebony, skin white as snow."
"Snow White!" the queen shouted in horror. Snow White was dressed in rags and had to work as a scullery maid, but she was happy. "I'm wishing for the one I love to find me today," she sang to her friends, the doves. That very day, a handsome prince rode up to the castle. He went straight to the wishing well and told Snow White of his love for her. Now her wish had come true, but they didn't know that the queen was watching and planning Snow White's death. The queen spoke to her faithful huntsman. "Take her far into the forest, where she can pick wildflowers, and then kill her. And to show that you have not failed me, bring me her heart." The huntsman was horrified, but he feared the queen's anger and did as he was ordered. The queen's huntsman watched as Snow White picked her flowers. Then he looked cautiously around him. Quietly, he took out his knife and crept towards Snow White. There was a terrible look in his eyes. Snow White saw the huntsman's shadow and turned. His knife was poised to strike, but suddenly he fell to his knees. "I can't do it," he sobbed. "Forgive me, your highness." "Why were you going to kill me?" asked the princess. "It's the queen," cried the huntsman. "She's mad. She'll stop at nothing. Now quick, child," the huntsman said. "Run away. Hide. In the woods. Anywhere. And never come back. Now go. Run!" Snow White ran off into the forest as fast as she could. As she ran through the trees, clutching branches caught her dress. She hurried on in terror, ever deeper into the forest. At last, she collapsed to the ground, exhausted. She lay there sobbing, unaware of the pairs of eyes watching her from the undergrowth. When she awoke, Snow White was surrounded by friendly animals. She told them how afraid she had been, and they listened to every word. "I really feel quite happy now," she told the animals, "but I do need a place to sleep at night. Perhaps you know somewhere." The birds chirped yes and nodded. "Will you take me there?" she asked. At once, the birds took hold of her cape and led her away. The animals followed, and soon they came to a little house deep in the forest. They went up to the little house, and Snow White rubbed dirt out the window and peered in. She saw that it was very dusty and untidy inside. She knocked on the door, but there was no answer. "Hello? May I come in?" she called, opening the door. No one seemed to be at home, so the animals followed her in. There were cobwebs everywhere, and a great pile of dirty dishes. Then Snow White noticed that there were 7 dusty little chairs. "It must be 7 little children," she said. "They've certainly never swept this room. You'd think their mother would... But perhaps they have no mother. I know. We'll clean the house and surprise them. Then maybe they'll let me stay." And that was just what they did. Snow White swept while the animals helped with the dusting and dishes. Soon they were finished. "Let's see what's upstairs," said Snow White. They all crept up, and Snow White carefully opened the door to the bedroom. "Oh, what adorable little beds," she said. "There are 7 of them. And look, they had their names carved on them. Duck, Happy, Sneezy, Dopey, Grumpy, Bashful, and Sleepy. What funny names for children." Then Snow White yawned and said, "Actually, I'm a little sleepy myself." At that, some of the animals yawned and stretched too, and Snow White realized that they were very tired from all the clearing up they had done. And so she lay down, but the bed was so small that she stretched across 3 of them. Soon she was fast asleep. Not far away, 7 dwarfs were digging in their mine for diamonds, rubies, and other precious stones. They worked with their pickaxes every day from morning to night, and Dopey spent his time sweeping up. Duck was at his sorting table testing the diamonds. Those that weren't good or big enough, he tossed away for Dopey to sweep up. But when the clock struck 5, he stopped at once and sang, "Hi-ho!" They all followed Duck out of the mine, singing as they went. "Hi-ho, hi-ho, it's home from work we go," they sang, with Dopey tagging along at the end. It had been a long, hard day. They were looking forward to their supper at home in their little house. "Hey, our floor's been swept," said Duck when they got home.
My chair's been dusted,
moaned Grumpy.
Gosh, our cobwebs are missing,
whispered Bashful.
Hey,
Someone stole our dishes, cried Sneezy.
They're not stolen, said Happy. They're hidden in the cupboard.
The dwarfs crept upstairs and saw something asleep on the beds.
What a monster! It covers 3 beds, said Sleepy.
Let's kill it before it wakes up. Just in time, they saw that it wasn't a monster, but a girl, and they put their clubs and pickaxes down. Soon Snow White woke up and sat up. "Oh," she said, "you're a little man. How do you do?" Happy introduced himself. "And this is Dopey," he went on. "He never talks."
You mean he can't?
asked Snow White.
He doesn't know,
laughed Happy. "He's never tried."
"And you must be grumpy,"
said Snow White.
We know who we are,
he replied grumpily.
but who are you?
Snow White told them all about herself and her stepmother, the Wicked Queen. They were horrified. "If you let me stay," she said, "I'll wash for you, and sew and cook."
Cook!
They all shouted. "You can stay! But first you must wash," she went on. They were horrified again, but Dog dragged them off to the tub. In her castle, the Queen went to her magic mirror. "See, I have Snow White's heart," she gloated. "Now, who is the fairest?" The mirror replied,
Snow White still lives, the fairest in the land. 'Twas the heart of a pig that you hold in your hand.
The Queen knew she had been tricked by her huntsman. She rushed to her laboratory, took a book of spells, and prepared to drink a magic potion. "Transform my beauty into ugliness, my clothes to a peddler's cloak," she said, and drank. The Queen's hair turned white, her face grew old and wrinkled, and her hands became crooked and bony.
A perfect disguise, she cackled. And now, a special sort of death for one so fair. One bite of the poisoned apple, and her eyes will close forever.
The Queen dipped an apple in her evil cauldron, and then read from her book of spells.
The victim can be revived only by love's first kiss. No fear of that. The dwarfs will think she's dead.
Laughed the Queen.
Snow White will be buried alive.
She took the poisoned apple and left her castle by a secret route. Next morning, the dwarfs went off to work. Snow White said goodbye and gave each one a kiss.
"Now, don't forget, my dear," said Duck.
"The old Queen's a sly one, so beware of strangers." "Don't worry, I'll be all right," replied Snow White, giving Dopey a kiss on his bald head. And she went back in to make a gooseberry pie for supper. A crackly old voice startled Snow White as she baked.
"Making pies, dearie? It's apple pies the men folks like, with apples like this. You can believe a harmless old peddler woman,"
the Queen said.
"Go on, try one. Take a bite from this one here."
The animals and birds sensed something evil about the peddler woman. When Snow White took the apple, they rushed through the forest to the dwarf's mine. They made the dwarfs sense danger too.
"One bite of this apple, and all your dreams will come true,"
the Queen said. Snow White whispered a wish for the prince to carry her away to his castle. Then she put the apple to her lips. "Oh, I feel strange," said Snow White when she bit into the apple.
Her breath will stew, her blood congeal, cackled the queen, and I'll be the fairest in the land.
At that moment, Snow White fell to the floor, and the apple rolled from her hand. The queen laughed and quickly left the house. The dwarfs knew that there must be something very wrong for the animals to come and fetch them. The deer carried them as fast as they could towards their house.
There she goes!
Grumpy suddenly shouted. Grumpy had caught sight of the queen.
After her!
He cried. The deer ran on through the wind and rain, chasing the queen through the woods.
The meddling little fools,
She cried as she climbed a rocky slope.
I'm trapped.
The queen screamed.
But I'll fix you! I'll crush your bones!
The dwarfs were getting nearer. With all her strength, the queen tried to move a huge boulder.
I'll fix you, little fools!
She screamed. The rain lashed down, and there was a roll of thunder. Suddenly, a great flash of lightning struck the ledge where the queen was standing. The ledge shattered, and with a terrifying shriek, she fell. The dwarfs went to the edge of the cliff and looked down. The shriek seemed to last forever, and then there was silence. Snow White still looked so beautiful that the dwarfs could not bear to bury her. They made a coffin of gold and kept vigil at her side. The prince, who had searched far and wide for Snow White, heard of the maiden who slept in a gold coffin. When at last he found her, he kissed her gently. Then he knelt beside her. Slowly, Snow White started to wake up. She held out her arms, and the prince lifted her up. The dwarfs danced for joy as the prince put Snow White on his horse. She said goodbye to the dwarfs, and then rode off to the prince's castle to live happily ever after. The end.